Galloping through the woods and traversing through wetlands, Waxen's elites were on their way back to Bulwark Citadel. While riding, Mute could not get the emotions and pain out of his head. The screams from the village were haunting, and the smell was detestable, like a bog infested with carcasses that stayed in his mind. Mute knew his doubts needed to be discussed, but he could never advocate such feelings, not because he was a strong brute with an iron will, but a talented and reserved man with a mellow voice and personal trauma. While Mute was lost in his thoughts, he saw Nalox raise his right fist, closing it to signify a stopping motion. "We will stop here and hunt for some lunch to ease our emaciated stomachs from our earlier endeavor," Nalox stated. "Ha! Good. My stomach has been growling since last night," snorted Tirade. Mute felt puzzled and annoyed with the elite's desensitized attitude towards the travesty they had caused. All the warriors dismounted their tall steeds and led them to the trees to be tied with ropes. The men scavenged for anything in their vicinity that was edible for consumption. "Mute, come with us. You can't possibly be fit enough to travel with the little energy you have left," Nalek shouted while gathering some spearheads and leather satchels. Mute shook his head and decided to motion toward the horses. "As if those thoroughbreds are not tired already from carrying us. As your commander in this new objective, I order you to join me." Nalex laughed as he walked towards Mute. Mute took a few seconds to think of the repercussions for disobeying even the most mundane of orders. Honor to all higher-ups was required and part of the oath given to the elites of Waxen. Mute shuffled over the Nilox and gave a half-hearted smile to inform him that he was willing to come, at least physically. Emotionally, Mute's thoughts were bouncing around like a wasp trapped in a glass jar. "Let's head east, deeper into the forest. I believe a creek is nearby," said Nilox. The two men slashed and pushed away branches and leaves to try to listen for the faint sound of running water. While walking through brush, Nilox seemed to be making noises that got Mute's attention. Looking over Nilox's shoulder, Mute saw a cut on his arm that displayed a yellowish-brown pus seeping over. Mute stood back into position when Nilox looked back, feeling Mute's breath permeate his neck hairs. When they found the creek, Nilox stepped down onto the moss that embedded the rocks in the watery ground. They saw berries growing on the side of the creek. They ranged from blueberries and raspberries to even the most exotic, tantalizing fruits that no man has laid eyes on. As Nilox foraged the fruits and the mushrooms, Mute grabbed a short spearhead in his hand, tracking any fish he could see in the water. Mute scanned the creek and saw moss and water bugs swaying around and causing little ripples that distorted his concentration. He began to focus and squint harder to capture the scene fully. Mute started to pay attention to what lay within the water. A fin began to skirt back and forth through the waters, nudging its way down the creek to eat the water bugs that propped themselves on the moss. Noticing this, Mute scooped his hand towards the water bug to make it leap towards the fish heading its direction. With his plan in action, the water bug glided its way towards the fish, unaware of its impending doom. When the fish swam to the surface to munch on the scrumptious water bug, Mute whisked the spear right into the gills of the fish, making it flop instantly. Mute then grabbed it and began to pare the fish, gutting it and using spare parts for future needs. Nalox returned to Mute instead of a large smile. "Look at some of the berries I have. It looks so good." He then whispered to Mute jokingly, "I don't have enough for everyone, so let's munch on these quickly." The two then plopped down a slight mound to eat the berries and be mesmerized by the surrounding nature that engulfed their presence. The tree branches provided shade for the men as they began to squish the berries between their teeth. Not being the best conversationalist, Mute pointed the gross infection that was on Nalex's arm. "Oh, that? I'm not too sure I got such a nasty scratch. Possibly have gotten this from earlier today," Nalex laughed. Mute looked worried and grabbed his satchel, rummaging through his supplies and finding oil to mend the wound. Mute dipped his finger into the oil and then motioned with his hands toward Nalex's cut. With a swift reaction, Nalex snatched his hand and gave a stern look to Mute, denying with his eyes that he needed help. Mute gave in return a tender look and wiggled his way out of Nalex's hands. "Sorry, I'm not used to such a sudden and kind offer to help me," Nalex muttered. Mute then began to rub the oil into the wound to treat it. Mute finished and smiled at Nilox to alert him that he was done and that he should be fine. I appreciate the help. It's rare to be treated in a willing way rather than be served by my demands to my troops. Mute's smile then began to fade as he began to recollect the horror of last night. He rubbed his temples to physically scrub away the emotional pain that was harboring his thoughts. Nilox noticed this while he looked at his oil-lathered hand. I understand your frustration from last night. Nilox then changed his head towards Mute. However, you have to factor in the events that have led up to these moments. Duke Waxen did not want to come to this. Those dealers from the village who traded the phony purple hue for money were in the wrong. They knew it was not the original, yet those thieves and liars gave it to Duke Waxen in exchange for gold coins. Their treachery cost them their lives, and hopefully, they will be made an example to any others thinking of crossing our Duke again, stated Nilox. Mute looked away and shook his head as an indicator that he did not agree with Nilox's remarks. Do you think Duke Waxen is a monster? Nilox asked. Mute's brain rushed, sensing guilt and fear that Nilox might turn it in for blasphemy against their powerful Duke. I see you, blushing red as can be, but I'm not upset, said Nilox. I know Duke Waxen on a personal level. Before I first pledged to his elite servitude 11 years ago, I was a bitter and angry man. I lived on the outskirts of Bulwark and farmed for days and nights, being jealous of those who were born into royalty and of those who were offered military benefits to serve Duke Waxen's principality. One day I was called upon to serve in the Gunnermen. It was the greatest time of my life, to leave my burdens and jealousy behind. I thought it'd become something extraordinary. I decided to join the elites of Waxen, become legendary, and reap the fruits of my labor. Now, because of Duke Waxen's generosity and fairness, I'm in a better place than I was. I have a family, miles of acres of land, and a manor that could fit the entire land of Bulwark. Thus, for respect of Duke Waxen and the oath I swore to the elites of Waxen Corps with the highest honor to honor's decree, I wholeheartedly believe his intuition is just. Mute shivered when Nilox said, just. It was almost as if all the good that came with serving their duke were wiped away by the atrocities that are committed under the guise of honor. Nilox stood up and said, in time, you'll see the works of your labor come to fruition. With you just starting this elite corps a year ago, it will take a couple more months until you will gain honor and respect, Nilox said. And who knows? Maybe you'll be part of the expansion project that's been murmured among the royal courts. Mute, confused about what that meant, pondered for a few seconds until Nilox crinkled his fingers into proceeding motion. Come, let's gonna move on and regroup with the horses and the elites. Mute got up, stretched, and grabbed his supplies. When they regrouped with the other men, Nilox and Mute gave their food to the pile. While the other men contributed, Tyrod came in shouting, Look what I found! He threw a dismembered elk onto the ground. It was covered in sores and dirt. They can't possibly be safe to eat. My shit looks more appetizing than that. What a little waste, one of the men shouted. A hurl of laughter and insults whisked into Tyrod's ears. Who said that? He screamed. A hush blanketed the area. The man continued, Whoa! No need to get your panties in a bunch. It's just a joke, like the food you brought. The elite smirked. Unlike the others, Mute knew of Tyrod's tantrums, and he began to slide closer towards the foolish man who was egging on Tyrod, who responded, You don't make a fool out of me when I command you. Technically, you're second in command after Nilox, said another elite. The elite, with the original insult, smirked. Lord Tyrod, you need to cool off in the creek that Nilox is talking about. You're clearly steaming out of your ears. I'll kill you! Tyrod lunged at the man who had been mocking him. He gravitated and seized his neck and plunged his fingers in an attempt to puncture the skin. The elite unsheathed his knife and started stabbing at Tyrod's spleen, which caused him to rage all the more. The surrounding men jumped up and began startled that a normal conversation was turned into a live murder attempt. Mute acted swiftly. He tackled Tirade and pushed him down into a bundle of thorn bushes nearby. With the elite free, he rushed to Tirade to keep the fight going. Mute ran up from behind and choked the man from his backside. They plummeted to the ground. Mute then lashed his legs around the elite to keep him from squirming. Mute used his fiery eyes at the standing men. He darted them back and forth from them to Tirade. Out of the trance of pure shock, the men quickly ran to detain Tirade, who was wrestling around the thorn bushes, wincing and thrashing like an animal caught in a trap. Nylox regained his sense of consciousness, realized the hell this situation devolved to, and ordered everyone to stop. If anyone else does any other action, you will be promptly reported to the barrack master. The scuffle ceased, and everyone looked over to Nylox. What an utter embarrassment, Nylox said while sitting back down to cook the food. From here until we reach back home, there will be nothing said about this scuffle. If any one of you talks or even alludes to this fiasco, I will give you a red mark. All the men, including Tirade and Mute, nodded and slowly went back to their seats. Shouldn't we patch that cut up? One of the men asked. Tirade looked over and stared while blood dripped and blotches of stains expanded across his shirt and side. The elite then looked down and ate his food quietly. Once the meal was finished, Mute went over to Tirade with his oil and made a gesture of help. I don't need your help, you disabled twat, said Tirade. He then leaned in towards Mute's ear and whispered, You're lucky you're not alone. Tirade knocked over the oil, spilling it all over the ground. Mute wanted to act, but did what he did best. He stayed silent, walked away, and let his inner thoughts do the talking. The elites gathered everything up and were ready to ride. Move out! We should be at Bulwark Citadel in just a few hours, shouted Nylox. The men hit the horses with their spurs and were riding south to bring Duke Waxen the news and his reward. Again, thoughts raced through Mute's mind. Now he feared Tirade's unhinged anger towards him and his fellow troops. But maybe, just maybe, he could go home to Happy Waxen and be rewarded with something for his service. Mute then rode with passion, knowing that this would all be over and that he would receive his just reward.